Chapter 2936, Fame Begins to Spread. Chapter 10, Fame Begins to Spread. S-Rank. Mysterious Moon's Nightingale barely managed to keep her HP at 80% even when she's fully equipped in epic equipment. How can a Tier 3 newbie like him take no damage whatsoever? Could he be some super guild's big shot here to experience the life of a newbie? I doubt that's the case. I heard that the various superpowers big shots are currently preparing to go up against the Outer World's apex experts. How would any of them have the time to retrain an account? He must be a superpowers big shot. Otherwise, how can he execute Miracle Dragon's 6 extreme slashes with such proficiency? Shifeng's performance had dumbfounded the spectating players in the hall. Everyone was also curious to find out Shifeng's true identity. They were more interested in his identity than the fact that he had just gotten an S-rank evaluation in the Colosseum's epic challenge. However, when Shifeng got teleported out of the arena, he paid no attention to the crowd talking about him. Instead, he calmly made his way to the NPC manager managing his arena to retrieve his rewards. Your performance was outstanding. You are the first to have completed the challenge unharmed in 100 Flow City's Colosseum in the past few decades, the Tier 4 NPC said, a hint of respect appearing in his eyes as he looked at Shifeng. Then, he retrieved an exquisite crystal box from the container beside him and handed it to Shifeng, saying, "Here is your reward. Apart from the demon god's blood necessary to construct an epic mana body, there is also a Colosseum Master's insignia for 100 Flow City inside. From now on, you are a VIP of 100 Flow City, and you will get to enjoy the privileges of a noble in the city." A noble's treatment. Shifeng was slightly surprised when he took out the golden lion insignia from the crystal box. The process of becoming a noble in the miniature ancient world's NPC cities was much more tedious compared to the outside world's NPC cities. The average city here required players to accumulate 500 contribution points through completing quests, and each quest only awarded around 3 to 5 points. Meanwhile, after becoming an NPC city's noble, players could enjoy certain privileges such as the right to buy land and shops. This privilege was especially important since players without noble status could not purchase lands and shops in the miniature ancient world. This restriction was also why, despite many guilds and adventurer teams entering the miniature ancient world, nobody had managed to acquire any land or shops in 100 Flow City even until now. This saves me a lot of trouble. Shifeng couldn't help but smile when he looked at the Colosseum Master's insignia. In his current state, he would have difficulty competing with the various large guilds for resources even in the newly opened miniature ancient world. After all, there was strength in numbers. The various large guilds also had numerous experts under their command. Meanwhile, if one did not have sufficient resources in God's domain, let alone advancing through the tiers, even leveling up quickly would become a problem. The resources one consumed increased with each subsequent tier they advanced in God's domain. For this reason, most independent experts without powerful backers would choose to join a guild after struggling by themselves for a certain period. Otherwise, they could kiss their progress goodbye. Needless to say, hardly anyone in God's domain would refuse to make progress when given the opportunity. After all, one's status and standing in God's domain would improve dramatically with each tier one ascended. If a player managed to become a Tier 6 God-ranked expert, they could receive VIP treatment from even world-class corporations in the real world. In God's domain, they would become existences capable of vaporizing an entire city with a single attack. Even flattening a kingdom consisting of several hundred cities wasn't out of the question. However, Shifeng currently had nothing in both the real world and in the world of God's domain. The current funds he had were also far from enough to let him improve his physical fitness in the real world, let alone helping him return to Tier 6 in God's domain. Thus, acquiring resources in God's domain became a must for Shifeng. Originally, Shifeng had been pondering how he could go about becoming a noble in 100 Flow City as quickly as possible and securing himself a shop in 100 Flow City before the various guilds. Now, he no longer had to worry about these problems. Whether in the real world or God's domain, real estate was the mother of wealth. Now that countless players had swarmed into the miniature ancient world, so long as he could secure some land and shops in 100 Flow City, he wouldn't have to worry about making money in the future. Subsequently, Shifeng wore the Colosseum Master's insignia and approached Wu Lingling, who stood nearby. Currently, Wu Lingling had her eyes glued to the S-rank evaluation displayed above Arena Number 3, an indescribable sense of joy and excitement coloring her eyes. Meanwhile, Gan Yuan, the grey-robed middle-aged man standing beside her, wore a complicated look on his face. Even until now, he still hadn't recovered from the shock of witnessing Shifeng's battle. Gan Yuan dared not and could not believe this outcome. According to the intelligence report Gan Yuan received, Shifeng was nothing but the abandoned guild leader of Shadow, a second-rate guild. Moreover, even at his peak, Shifeng had only reached Tier 3. Yet, now, not only did Shifeng come out unscathed after clashing with 10 powerful sea giants for 1 minute, but he had even shown astonishing mastery over Miracle Dragon's 6 extreme slashes. No matter how Gan Yuan looked at it, Shifeng should be a mighty expert that shouldn't be underestimated. If speaking solely based on technique standards, Shifeng would be unmatched in Dazzle Wave, a first-rate guild. Yet, a guild like Shadow had banished such an expert because he was too weak. Did we get the wrong person? Gan Yuan couldn't help but harbor such a thought. However, before Gan Yuan could snap out of his daze, Shifeng approached them and looked at Wu Lingling apologetically, saying, "Sorry for the wait. You seemed to be in a hurry to look for me, Wu Lingling. Do you have some urgent business with me?" Upon hearing Shifeng's words, Wu Lingling glanced at Gan Yuan before carefully saying, "It's nothing big actually, Instructor Sha. Uncle Gan is just hoping to talk with you." Wu Lingling didn't wish to bring up the matter of Gan Yuan replacing Shifeng as her instructor. After all, it was too disrespectful toward an instructor of the academy. Moreover, she felt that learning from Shifeng wasn't a bad idea, either. 6 extreme slashes was the trademark move of Miracle Dragon, the person she idolized. It was also a combat technique she had constantly been thinking of learning. Now that Shifeng had shown himself to have incredible mastery over the technique, this was undoubtedly the best opportunity for her to learn it. However, her elder sister had gone out of her way to get Gan Yuan to train her, and she couldn't simply ignore her elder sister's decisions. Thus, she decided that it was best to let Gan Yuan bring up the troublesome matter instead. "Talk with me." Hearing Wu Lingling's words, Shifeng turned toward Gan Yuan and narrowed his eyes. Then, he smiled and asked, "May I know what business Brother Gan has with me? Are you perhaps here to discuss Wu Lingling's future education with me?" Wu Lingling's talents were clear for all to see. There was no way the guild Wu Xiaoxiao belonged to wouldn't be interested in such a talent. Although recruiting Wu Lingling shortly after she joined the God's Domain Academy would be going against the Academy's rules, the benefits far outweigh the risks. If Dazzle Wave could recruit Wu Lingling before she developed, not only could the guild better develop her potential, but doing so would also increase Wu Lingling's loyalty to the guild. Meanwhile, as soon as Shifeng spoke up, Gan Yuan's expression immediately turned awkward. He didn't think that the person before him was the instructor he was looking for. To make matters worse, Shifeng had even seen through his thoughts. For a time, Gan Yuan was at a loss for words. Originally, Gan Yuan had planned to simply greet Shifeng and forget about Wu Lingling's matter. After all, offending a Tier 3 expert with no background and offending an expert who had acquired an S-rank evaluation in the Colosseum's Epic Challenge were two entirely different things. Right now, Gan Yuan wanted nothing more than to beat up the person responsible for collecting information on Shifeng. However, Gan Yuan was an executive of a first-rate guild. He had experienced many crests and troughs during his career in God's domain. Although he felt very embarrassed on the inside, he behaved as if nothing had happened on the outside. With a bright smile on his face, he said, "You jest, Instructor Sha. All academies associated with God's domain have a common rule prohibiting organizations from poaching talents in advance. Although Dazzle Wave isn't a superpower, it is still a first-rate guild in God's domain, so we strictly abide by the rules. I am only here this time because I have long since heard of your great name. I never got the opportunity to meet you, so I asked Lingling to introduce me. Please don't misunderstand my intentions, Instructor Sha." Wu Lingling couldn't help but be dumbfounded when she heard Gan Yuan's words. She looked at the man as if she was meeting him for the first time. "I see." Shifeng nodded. Then, His expression brightened up a little as he said, "However, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you, Brother Gan. I am merely a Tier 3 player that Shadow has banished. How can I possibly enter the eyes of a first-rate guild like Dazzle Wave?" Gan Yuan awkwardly laughed when he heard Shifeng's words. He also quietly wiped the sweat dripping down from his forehead. Although Shifeng hadn't said anything hostile, Gan Yuan felt as if he was standing in front of a ferocious beast capable of seeing through all lies. When he looked at Shifeng's faint smile and calm eyes, he saw no signs of a downtrodden man in his 30s whatsoever. Is he only the ex-guild leader of a second-rate guild? Gan Yuan wondered as he looked at Shifeng. In Gan Yuan's opinion, Shifeng's insightfulness and the oppressive feeling he gave off far superior to those of even Dazzle Wave's guild leader. When standing in front of Shifeng, Gan Yuan felt no different than a child. When Gan Yuan was about to say something, a group of players wearing Mysterious Moon's guild emblem suddenly approached Shifeng. Why are they here? Gan Yuan couldn't help but be surprised when he saw these players. Out of the dozen or so Mysterious Moon members standing before him, every one of them was fully equipped in level 150 epic equipment. Moreover, the dense killing intent they radiated deterred even the many experts present in the hall from approaching them. At a glance, Gan Yuan could tell that these Mysterious Moon members were battle-hardened experts, and he couldn't help but feel frightened when standing in their presence. Zhuo Yalin, the leader of the group, gave off an especially bone-chilling aura. Gan Yuan felt as if he was standing within a cave made out of ice when he stood beside her, and he dared not loosen his guard even for a moment. Before Gan Yuan could react to the situation, Zhuo Yalin stepped closer to Shifeng and started scrutinizing him with an enchanting smile on her face. Then, she enthusiastically introduced herself. "Hello, I am Nightingale from Mysterious Moon. Your performance just now has truly amazed me. Can I ask for the opportunity to treat you to a drink?" Zhuo Yalin's voice was as beautiful as an oriole's, and her actions carried both a lady's charm and bold enthusiasm. Many of the male players present were instantly captivated by her, and they couldn't help but look at Shifeng with eyes full of envy. Meanwhile, Wu Lingling gaped in shock in this situation, her eyes filled with disbelief as she switched her gaze between her idol Zhuo Yalin and Shifeng. Zhuo Yalin was the prided genius of Mysterious Moon, a first-rate guild. She was also the vice-commander of Mysterious Moon's main force. She was even being nurtured as a potential vice-guild leader candidate in the guild. There was no doubt that she was a core executive in Mysterious Moon. As icing on the cake, Zhuo Yalin also possessed an enchanting body and exquisite face. Many young talents from the various superpowers had once sought to pursue Zhuo Yalin. However, the number of invitations Zhuo Yalin accepted numbered less than a handful. Yet, now, Zhuo Yalin was taking the initiative to invite Shifeng out for a drink. Even the vice-guild leaders and guild leaders of other first-rate guilds were unlikely to receive such treatment. "Hello, Miss Nightingale." Shifeng smiled as he looked at Zhuo Yalin. He had somewhat an impression of the woman before him since she was quite the celebrity in God's Domain's professional league. Many superpowers had tried recruiting her before, but she had refused all invitations and chose to remain in Mysterious Moon. "I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I will have to turn down your invitation since I am very busy right now. If you wish to have a drink, we can do so on another day. Of course, if you wish to discuss business with me, I very much welcome it. You are as great as I imagined you to be, Mr. Black Flame." Zhuo Yalin's smile deepened. She wasn't at all surprised to hear Shifeng refusing her invitation. "I'll get straight to the point, then. I highly admire your skills. Thus, I would like to invite you to join me in besieging the Dark Moon outpost 10 days later. As for remuneration, feel free to name your price." Besieging the Dark Moon outpost. Realization dawned upon Gan Yuan when he heard Zhuo Yalin's offer. The miniature ancient world was filled with a type of hostile energy that corroded players' bodies. This energy was much more hostile than ones found on the main continent, thus reducing the amount of time players could spend outside the safety of NPC cities even further. To make matters worse, mounts originating from the main continent couldn't be used here, so players could only travel across maps by foot. This greatly restricted players' range of activity and exploration progress of the miniature ancient world. Fortunately, There was a solution to this problem. Mana outposts were located all across the miniature ancient world, and players could use the environment and facilities in these outposts to dispel the hostile energy in their bodies. Although the effectiveness of these outposts wasn't comparable to NPC cities, players could still use these outposts to increase their range of activity by a significant margin. Thus, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that whoever controlled these mana outposts controlled the miniature ancient world. Meanwhile, a battle for control over these mana outposts would be hosted once a month, and among the many mana outposts out there, the Dark Moon outpost was located closest to 100 Flow City. Hence, practically every guild based in 100 Flow City had their eyes set on the Dark Moon outpost. However, there was a participation limit for the battle over the Dark Moon outpost. To participate in the battle, players had to acquire a permission token dropped by specific targets scattered across the wild, and only 5,000 of such tokens would drop each month. If every guild in 100 Flow City competed for these tokens, each guild could only acquire a small amount. Meanwhile, in such a small-scale battle, the role a powerful expert could play was massive. After pondering for a moment, Shifeng smiled at Zhuo Yalin and said, "I am interested in your offer. However, I have two conditions." Zhuo Yalin was a little surprised by Shifeng's response. She didn't think that Shifeng would agree so readily. Then, she revealed a seductive smile and generously said, "Please speak, Mr. Blackflame. For my first condition, if we win, I hope to acquire the rights to a large shop in the Dark Moon outpost," Shifeng stated in a definitive tone. This, Zhuo Yalin hesitated a little when she heard Shifeng's condition. Immediately, the tall and robust man standing behind Zhuo Yalin glared at Shifeng and said, "Our Vice Commander is sincerely extending an invitation to you, Mr. Blackflame. You are only participating by yourself, so don't you think you're asking a little too much? A mana outpost only has 6 shops, and only one of them is a large shop." The other mysterious moon experts also nodded in agreement. They also felt that Shifeng was going too far in his demands. However, Shifeng didn't mind their reactions and continued, "This brings us to my second condition. I won't be participating alone. Instead, I hope you can prepare 31 slots for us." 31 slots. Zhuo Yalin was a little surprised, not expecting Shifeng to already have his own team. However, after thinking it over, she found this situation to be reasonable. After all, how could such a powerful expert not have a team to support him? Immediately, she nodded and said, "All right. If you can help Mysterious Moon achieve victory, I can agree to give you a large shop, Mr. Blackflame." Afterward, Shifeng signed a contract with Zhuo Yalin via the main god system. So long as Mysterious Moon acquired the Dark Moon outpost, Shifeng would gain the rights to the outpost's largest shop. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. As their interaction had attracted a lot of attention, Zhuo Yalin didn't continue chatting with Shifeng after signing the contract. Immediately, she left the Colosseum together with her team, leaving Shifeng, Gan Yuan, and Wu Lingling behind. When Wu Lingling could no longer see Zhuo Yalin in the hall, she quietly asked Shifeng, "Instructor Shi, about the 31-man team you mentioned. Don't tell me you're talking about me and the other new students." Wu Lingling had a rough idea of Shifeng's situation. So, when she heard the headcount of 31, she couldn't help but grow worrisome. "What do you think?" In response, Shifeng gave Wu Lingling a look and chuckled before leaving the Colosseum as well. Chapter 2937 Reconstructing Mana Body. Chapter 11 Reconstructing Mana Body. Even after Shifeng had left the Colosseum, it took a long time for Wu Lingling to come back to her senses. "What are your thoughts on Instructor Shi's words, Uncle Gan? Do you think he really intends to have us students participate in the battle for the Dark Moon outpost?" Wu Lingling asked as she looked at Gan Yuan, her heart filled with anxiety and excitement. The Dark Moon outpost was a stronghold that every guild based in 100 Flow City sought to obtain. Meanwhile, because of the limited number of people that could participate in the actual competition, every participating guild would undoubtedly be sending their strongest members to represent them. Although many of God's Domain's guilds did not send their truly powerful experts to develop in the miniature ancient world, some of the larger guilds should not have any problems dispatching peak experts to fight for the Dark Moon outpost. In the case of first-rate guilds, even the weakest member they sent would most likely be first-rate experts that were capable of reaching the trial tower's 7th floor. In comparison, most of the students apprenticed under Shifeng hadn't even reached the trial tower's 5th floor. With their strength, they couldn't even serve as cannon fodder if they participated in the competition. Of course, Wu Lingling couldn't rule out the possibility that Shifeng was trying to widen their horizons. After all, it was rare to see battles involving thousands of powerful experts in God's domain, let alone participate in one. If budding players like them could take part in such a battle, it would significantly help their future development. However, as the first mana outpost one would encounter after leaving 100 Flow City, the Dark Moon outpost held extraordinary significance to the various guilds. It was also why Zhuo Yalin tried to recruit Shifeng's help even if it meant paying a steep cost. Only, if Zhuo Yalin were to find out that Shifeng's so-called teammates were merely a bunch of freshmen from the God's Domain Academy, she would absolutely refuse Shifeng's demand. If Mysterious Moon failed to occupy the Dark Moon outpost, the entire guild would probably bear an eternal grudge against Shifeng. After all, the 30 participation slots Shifeng asked for could significantly impact the competition's outcome. Not to mention, Mysterious Moon had no lack of peak experts and first-rate experts to fill these slots. The guild wasn't so desperate as to seek freshman students as backup. "He is probably joking with you," Gan Yuan said, shaking his head and smiling. "There are only 5,000 participation slots in total, and there are more than 30 second-rate guilds and 7 first-rate guilds based in 100 Flow City. There are also numerous third-rate guilds and unrated guilds. A first-rate guild would be fortunate to even secure 300 slots. If he lets you students take up 10% of Mysterious Moon slots, Mysterious Moon might as well call it quits already." In Gan Yuan's opinion, there was no way an expert of Shifeng's caliber would not know of the Dark Moon outpost's significance. Even if he wanted to train his students, there was no need to do so during such a crucial event. Having the students participate in the competition would be no different than making an enemy out of Mysterious Moon. Although Shifeng possessed great combat standards, even he would suffer if he angered a first-rate guild. After all, even Tier 5 experts dared not go up against first-rate guilds upfront. Otherwise, they would have to face the pursuit of several Tier 5 experts. However, shortly after Gan Yuan finished speaking, Wu Lingling received a message that thoroughly dumbfounded her and Gan Yuan. Is he insane? Gan Yuan felt his mind falling into disarray when he read the message Wu Lingling shared with him. The message's content was simple. Shifeng had appointed Wu Lingling as his class representative, and he had tasked her with contacting her classmates and gathering them in 100 Flow City's Blue Rose Bar in 8 hours. At the end of the message, Shifeng had also stated that all students under him would be participating in the battle for the Dark Moon outpost 10 days later. "What should I do, Uncle Gan?" Wu Lingling couldn't help but be scared by this situation. "Should I ask Big Sis to send some experts over?" Wu Lingling was truly afraid now that she was certain of Shifeng's intentions. After all, what Shifeng was doing was no different than playing with their lives. If this situation wasn't handled properly, all of them would be dragged down into the abyss. In response to Wu Lingling's question, Gan Yuan shook his head and said, "There's no point in doing that. Entering the miniature ancient world is equivalent to starting a new account. Not everyone is willing to take such a risk since there is no guarantee that they can return to and surpass their strongest state." Although the benefit of reconstructing one's mana body was indeed tempting, the mana body wasn't the only factor that affected a player's ability to ascend to higher tiers. There were still many other factors that had to be taken into account. Typically, only experts who had poor foundations and encountered very little fortuitous opportunities in God's domain would be willing to enter the miniature ancient world. Either that or the mana body they created was far from ideal. Take Gan Yuan, for example. He had only created a silver mana body with a 76% completion rate when he was at Tier 3. While it wasn't terrible, it wasn't good, either. If he kept with that mana body, it was unlikely that he would ever reach Tier 5 in his lifetime. Thus, he had decided to enter the miniature ancient world. Not to mention, he could also nurture a budding talent like Wu Lingling and earn a favor from Wu Xiaoxiao, one of the top prodigies of the guild's younger generation. Apart from him, few of the guild's other Tier 4 experts were willing to enter the miniature ancient world. And for those who did enter the miniature ancient world, the guild had long since assigned them other important tasks. There was no way they'd be willing to make time to help a bunch of outsiders. Upon hearing Gan Yuan's words, Wu Lingling remembered that they were no longer on the main continent but in the miniature ancient world instead. Here, even a prioritized talent like her elder sister would have difficulty mobilizing groups of experts. But you don't have to worry too much. I know a few skilled experts who have entered the miniature ancient world. If I give them a call, I'm sure we won't have any problems coping with the competition, Gan Yuan said, smiling when he saw Wu Lingling's crestfallen expression. However, I'll need you to talk things out with Instructor Shi first. Under normal circumstances, Gan Yuan wouldn't have bothered himself with such a troublesome matter. However, after witnessing Shi Feng's skills, he felt that it wouldn't be a bad idea to befriend such a powerful expert. After all, it was rare for Tier 4 experts like Gan Yuan to come across an expert of Shi Feng's caliber. And even if he managed to come across such an expert, the other party wouldn't bother interacting with him. After all, they were standing on two completely different levels. Meanwhile, for experts like Gan Yuan, who were stuck at Tier 4, their only option to make further progress was to acquire more resources. However, the resources necessary were not things that measly Tier 4 experts could obtain. Only experts of Shi Feng's caliber could do so. Thus, now that there was an opportunity to befriend such an expert, Gan Yuan would naturally take it. Wu Lingling also nodded to Gan Yuan's request. 100 Flow City, City Hall. After leaving the Colosseum, Shi Feng had visited the City Hall and made his way up to the second floor. When Shi Feng arrived on the second floor, a blonde elven woman wearing black office wear approached him. Then, the woman pointed at a record book on a nearby coffee table and smiled, saying, "Greetings, sir. You can find all of 100 Flow City's vacant lands and shops sold here. If you are interested in a particular land or shop, feel free to tell me. I will do my best to give you the best price." The record book was very thick. When Shi Feng flipped through the pages, he found that the number of lands and shops available in 100 Flow City far exceeded even that of royal capitals found on the main continent. Looking at all the available options, Shi Feng didn't know where to begin his search for his ideal shop. After looking through the record book for some time, Shi Feng gave up and asked, "Do you have any recommendations for shops in the central area?" There are two excellent shops in the central area. One is an advanced shop located near the main street. It has 7 floors, and it is selling for 45,000 gold. The other one is a hotel located near the teleportation hall. The hotel has 3 floors, and it is selling for 22,000 gold, the elven administrator said as she took out 2 projection crystals and activated them. These 2 locations have only gone up for sale starting this month. Whether it is their price or location, they are rare finds in 100 Flow City. Shi Feng couldn't help but be moved as he looked at the projected images. The lands and shops found in 100 Flow City's central area were exceptionally expensive. Even a basic shop sold for upwards of 30,000 gold, while vacant lands sold for upwards of 20,000 gold. Moreover, these prices only referred to small lands. Meanwhile, the 2 locations the administrator introduced both occupied medium lands. The fact that they're being sold for such a low price could be considered a hidden benefit to the first player to purchase shops and lands in 100 Flow City. Moreover, out of the 2 recommendations, one of them was even an advanced shop. If Shi Feng could purchase this shop, he could make a fortune just by letting other players consign their items at the shop. Not to mention, an advanced shop would also come with its own specialty goods, and he could use these goods to earn a stable income. As for the hotel, it wasn't a bad option, either. Now that there were no guild residences in 100 Flow City yet, the only way players could accumulate the double EXP buff and accelerate their grinding speed would be to stay in hotels. Thus, Shi Feng could also earn a significant income if he bought the hotel. Unfortunately, Shi Feng lacked the coins to purchase even the hotel. Previously, he had spent 2 million credits to purchase 20,000 gold from a player merchant. Afterward, he had spent 500 gold in the Colosseum. Thus, he only had 19,500 gold in his bag right now. Can I get a discount if I decide to make a purchase? Shifeng asked as he looked at the administrator. The elven administrator pondered for a moment when she heard Shifeng's question. Then, she said, "You are the first person to have acquired 100 Flow City's Colosseum Masters insignia in the past few decades. If you decide to make a purchase, I can give you a 20% discount on one purchase." 20%? Shifeng was surprised. Originally, he thought it would be great if he could get even a 5% discount. He didn't think that the Colosseum Masters insignia would provide him with such an amazing benefit. "Okay, I'll take this hotel, then," Shifeng said as he pointed at the 3-story hotel projected before him. Although the advanced shop was tempting, he currently lacked funds and resources. Thus, the hotel was his best option. Moreover, he still needed to guide a bunch of students. If he bought the hotel, he could save on their accommodation fees, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. "Very well. That will be 17,600 gold, the administrator said. "You will also have to pay a monthly management fee of 1,000 gold for this hotel. If you fail to make payment for 3 consecutive months, we will be repossessing the hotel." Afterward, Shifeng decisively paid 17,600 gold to the elven administrator and received the hotel's deed in return. Then, he left the city hall and visited the hotel to complete the property transfer. The hotel was located next to the teleportation hall, so it could be considered prime real estate in 100 Flow City. After all, every player that teleported into 100 Flow City using a return scroll would arrive in the teleportation hall. So, the street the teleportation hall was located on became a place where almost all players had to pass through. In reality, the hotel's value was far from being worth just 17,600 gold. Even if it was sold for an astronomical price of 50,000 gold, guilds would still fight to purchase it. A magic array currently sealed the 3-story hotel, and no employees were working in the establishment. Only Shifeng, the holder of the hotel's deed, could enter the place. The density of the mana here is quite good. It's actually 30% higher than the outside world. Shifeng felt very satisfied when he sensed the mana within the hotel. A difference of 30% in mana density might not seem like much, but the mana in the miniature ancient world was originally much higher than the main continent's mana already. Thus, an increase of 30% was substantial. Players could receive substantial benefits if they tried to perceive and manipulate mana in this environment. Afterward, Shifeng started inspecting the hotel's interior. The hotel had 600 rooms spread across its 3 floors, of which 560 were basic rooms and 40 were advanced rooms. This was an impressive number for a basic hotel. Even if he charged only 20 silver per room, he could still make 120 gold per day. Currently, ordinary Tier 3 experts earned only 2 to 3 gold per day on average. After deducting the money spent on repairing equipment and purchasing supplies, a Tier 3 expert would be fortunate if they could have 1 gold remaining. Meanwhile, a daily income of 120 gold was unfathomable for the average Tier 3 expert. When Shifeng entered an advanced room, he found that the density of the mana here was 20% higher than the mana found inside the basic rooms. "This is a good place to reconstruct my mana body." Originally, Shifeng had planned to visit an advanced hotel in 100 Flow City to reconstruct his mana body. The construction of a mana body heavily depended on the ambient mana's density. Players would have a much easier time constructing their mana bodies if they did it in a place with dense mana. Of course, after a certain point, the benefits high-density mana brought would start to diminish. Meanwhile, the density of the mana found in this hotel's advanced rooms was already considerably high. Even if Shifeng visited a place with even denser mana, the benefits he could gain would be negligible. Immediately, Shifeng sat cross-legged on the mana-gathering magic array prepared in the middle of the room. Then, he took out the demon god's blood that he had won from the Colosseum. The instant Shifeng opened the vial housing the demon god's blood, a powerful divine might instantly flooded the room. Even Shifeng found himself having difficulty breathing under the pressure of this divine might. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. System. Do you wish to use the demon god's blood and begin reconstructing your mana body? Yes. Chapter 29:38 Going Beyond Epic. Chapter 12 Going Beyond Epic. As soon as Shifeng chose to reconstruct his mana body, the crimson blood in the vial transformed into streams of purplish-red mist that flowed into his body. 3 seconds later, golden divine runes appeared around Shifeng one after another, emitting ripples of divine might. The divine might was incredibly powerful, and even Tier 4 experts would find themselves immobilized when subjected to it. The divine runes that appeared were akin to flames as they continuously burned and erased Shifeng's original mana body. 1 minute. 3 minutes. 10 minutes. After 15 minutes had passed, Shifeng could feel the divine might that enveloped his body growing weaker and weaker. Likewise, the presence of his mana body also grew fainter and fainter. By the time the divine might disappeared completely, his mana body's presence had disappeared completely. Simultaneously, a feeling of weakness spread across Shifeng's body. Amazing. It removed my mana body completely. Shifeng grew excited when he sensed that his bronze mana body had disappeared already. Although players could progress up to Tier 6 in God's domain, the biggest milestone was at Tier 3. This was because the mana body players constructed at Tier 3 would play a significant role in their advancement to higher tiers in the future. The mana body was also the main factor that separated God's domain's experts into 2 distinct classes. Even if a player managed to reach Tier 4, if their mana body did not reach the silver rank, they couldn't be regarded as an upper-class expert no matter what. They could never become a true mainstay in first-rate guilds and above. However, this wasn't an unreasonable distinction. After all, the mana body represented a player's future potential. No guild would be willing to support and nurture a person with no potential. This was also why second- and third-rate guilds could never contend against first-rate guilds. Unlike second- and third-rate guilds, first-rate guilds would only accept those with a silver mana body or above as their mainstays and executives. Next is the last step. Shifeng focused his attention on the system notification that had appeared before him. System, you have begun the reconstruction of your mana body. You have 6 hours to reconstruct your mana body. System, congratulations. You are the first player to have acquired a perfect epic demon god's blood. You can choose between obtaining 1 legendary mana body diagram, 1 peak epic mana body diagram, or 1 advanced epic mana body diagram. Legendary? Shifeng was dumbfounded. When he had become a Tier 6 sword god in the past, the mana body he had created for himself at Tier 3 was only an advanced epic mana body. Although he couldn't say for certain that he had been the only person to have acquired an advanced epic mana body out of the many god-ranked experts back then, even if there were others like him, there shouldn't be more than a handful. After all, in the eyes of most guilds, gold mana bodies were already the best mana body one could acquire. Information on epic mana bodies was so rare that most people didn't even know they existed. If not for the miniature Ancient Worlds expansion pack information publicizing the existence of epic mana bodies, the first-rate guilds in this life probably wouldn't even know that there existed mana bodies surpassing gold mana bodies. As for legendary mana bodies, that was something even Shifeng had never heard of after becoming a Tier 6 sword god. It should be known that players with a gold mana body could already roam the continent without fear of the hostile energies that plagued high-level maps. If a player acquired an epic mana body, they could further boost their stamina and concentration recovery rates. Even their perception toward mana would receive a considerable improvement. The benefits an epic mana body provided could probably allow players to move about freely even in the miniature Ancient Worlds hostile environment. Acquiring an epic mana body was also part of Shifeng's plan to restart his campaign in God's domain. However, Shifeng never thought that there existed another rank above epic. Before Shifeng could recover from his surprise, another system notification appeared. System, you have 15 minutes to choose a mana body diagram. If you fail to decide within 15 minutes, you will receive the advanced epic mana body by default. Interesting. Shifeng smiled when he saw the system notification. Then, he began carefully inspecting the 3 mana body diagrams the system provided. If given a choice, Shifeng would naturally choose the best mana body he could get his hands on. However, that was based on the precondition of completing the construction process within the allotted time. If he went with the legendary mana body out of greed and failed to construct it, he would simply be throwing away the opportunity to secure himself an advanced epic mana body or peak epic mana body. 10 minutes later, Shifeng closed his eyes and took a deep breath. As expected of a mana body that is above epic rank. Even Apex experts are unlikely to be able to complete this legendary mana body in just 6 hours. Shifeng already experienced constructing an advanced epic mana body in his previous life, so he was confident he could construct a perfect one this time. He was even confident he could construct a peak epic mana body with a 95% completion rate or above. The construction of a mana body depended on the player's control over mana. The more adept one was at manipulating mana, the easier it would be for one to construct one's mana body. Meanwhile, as someone who had become a Tier 6 god in the past, Shifeng's mastery over mana manipulation had long since reached a realm that ordinary experts could not fathom. However, the legendary mana body's complexity was far above that of even epic mana bodies. The construction of an advanced epic mana body only needed players to control 5 sources of mana to create 5 separate magic arrays, while a peak epic mana body needed players to control 8 sources of mana. However, in the case of the legendary mana body, players needed to control as many as 16 sources of mana simultaneously. Even Shifeng had barely met this requirement. Moreover, this still wasn't the most crucial point. What made constructing the legendary mana body truly challenging was that players needed to construct 7 master magic arrays and connect them to form one grandmaster magic array. Although Shifeng had been a grandmaster magician during his previous life, with his current tier and concentration standard, he would be hard-pressed to construct so many high-ranking magic arrays. Not to mention, every one of these magic arrays needed to have a considerably high completion rate. Otherwise, the legendary mana body he created might even lose out to an epic mana body with a high completion rate. However, despite knowing the difficulty, Shifeng still chose to construct the legendary mana body without hesitation. He had lost his memories for some inexplicable reason after entering the main world in the past. This showed that the main world was a much more dangerous place than he expected and that the strength he had back then wasn't enough to ensure his safety in the main world. Thus, what he needed to do now was simple: become much stronger than he had been in his previous life. Only by doing so would he have a chance at recovering his lost memories. Meanwhile, the legendary mana body was undoubtedly the first step into helping him grow stronger. Thus, regardless of the difficulty, he needed to try constructing the legendary mana body. Subsequently, Shifeng began manipulating the surrounding mana and constructing the legendary mana body based on the provided diagram. Because Shifeng sorely lacked in concentration recovery methods right now, manipulating 16 sources of mana simultaneously placed a heavy burden on his mind. At this time, he was relying entirely on his knowledge and experience as a Grandmaster Magician to create the 9 supporting magic arrays and 1 Grandmaster magic array. As time passed and he encountered failure after failure, he grew increasingly familiar with the Grandmaster magic array's construction process. After working continuously for 4 hours, Shifeng finally completed his first attempt at constructing the legendary mana body. System: mana body constructed. Completion rate 71%. Do you wish to keep this mana body? No. Shifeng rejected without hesitation. A mana body needed to reach an 80% completion rate for it to function normally. Below 80%, a mana body would have its effects weakened. Thus, Shifeng's legendary mana body needed an 80% completion rate at the very minimum. Otherwise, he would have been better off going for an epic mana body with completion rate above 90%. After all, a mana body with a 90% completion rate would be able to perform at 100% capacity, and every additional percentage gained in completion rate would improve the mana body's performance significantly. In the past, Shifeng had been lucky and achieved a 91% completion rate on his advanced epic mana body. It had saved him a lot of trouble when he was advancing to higher tiers. Subsequently, Shifeng started his second attempt. Because of his previous experience, Shifeng took less than half an hour this time to complete his mana body. Moreover, its completion rate had surpassed the passing mark and reached 83%. However, Shifeng wasn't satisfied with this outcome, so he proceeded with his third and fourth attempts. Shifeng made a slight mistake on his third attempt, and the completion rate he got was 76%. On his fourth attempt, he managed an 86% completion rate. For the average expert, they would be delighted with such a result even if their mana body was only at the silver rank, let alone the unheard-of legendary rank. However, Shifeng still wasn't satisfied with this result. "I only have time for one more try." Shifeng hesitated for a moment when he saw the remaining time. However, after thinking it over, he clenched his teeth and began his fifth attempt. Shifeng would be lying if he said he wasn't satisfied with an 86% completion rate. However, if he wished to surpass his previous life, this result wasn't enough. After all, he no longer had the support of a guild in this life. If he lacked a sufficiently powerful mana body, he would have a tough time rising to the top of God's domain. After 4 attempts, Shifeng had already become very familiar with the legendary mana body's construction process. On his fourth attempt, he needed 10 minutes to construct the 7 master magic arrays and link them into one big grandmaster magic array. Now, he needed only 7 minutes to do so. Moreover, the construction process went much more smoothly than before. However, time was also ticking away rapidly as Shifeng constructed his mana body. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. 17 minutes remaining. 12 minutes remaining. 6 minutes. 3 minutes. When less than 2 minutes remained, Shifeng inhaled and exhaled deeply. "Good. It's done," Shifeng exclaimed out of excitement. Simultaneously, a system notification also appeared before him. System, mana body constructed. Completion rate 94%. Do you wish to keep this mana body? Chapter 2939 Inherent Mana Domain. Chapter 13 Inherent Mana Domain 94%. Shifeng grew ecstatic when he read the system notification. A mana body with a 90% completion rate could already perform at 100% capacity, and every percentage increase after 90% would further enhance the mana body to a certain extent. Meanwhile, an additional 4% would provide a massive improvement. To provide some context, take Alice, the Witch of the West, for example. She was known by all in God's domain for her gold mana body that had a 98% completion rate. This gold mana body granted her extraordinary perception and control toward mana, which, in turn, allowed her to stand above all magical class players. Meanwhile, the only mana body that could match Alice's near-perfect gold mana body was probably Shifeng's advanced epic mana body, which had a 91% completion rate. Now, though, not only did Shifeng have a legendary mana body, but its completion rate had even reached 94%. If comparing solely in terms of mana perception and control, he was leagues above his previous life. System, mana body constructed. Completion rate 94%. Do you wish to keep this mana body? Upon receiving another reminder from the system, Shifeng quickly snapped out of his daze and chose to keep the mana body he created. Immediately afterward, golden divine runes appeared around Shifeng's body. The dense mana surrounding Shifeng also flooded into his body, continuously improving his body's overall strength and perception. In just several seconds, Shifeng could sense that he had already surpassed himself when he first constructed his advanced epic mana body. The strengthening process continued for nearly 20 seconds before the divine runes faded out of existence. At this time, not one bit of mana remained inside the room. Mana was the foundation of all life in God's domain, so a place without mana was not a place that living creatures could survive in. Even Tier 3 players with a gold mana body could only survive in a space void of mana for a short period. Yet, at this time, Shifeng did not feel even the slightest discomfort while sitting in this manaless room. So, this is a legendary mana body? An indescribable sense of shock filled Shifeng as he perceived the space around him. When he had first completed his advanced epic mana body in his previous life, he had only acquired a rudimentary form of a mana domain whose only function was to prevent the mana in his body from leaking away. However, the completion of the legendary mana body had directly provided him with a fully functioning mana domain. Although this mana domain only covered a small radius of 10 yards, it was still a bona fide mana domain. Within the space the mana domain covered, he was the ruler. He could freely manipulate mana within this space and prevent it from being influenced by the mana outside. Typically, players would only begin creating a rudimentary form of a mana domain after they had reached Tier 4. Meanwhile, only a small minority of experts would be capable of creating a full-fledged mana domain at Tier 4. Yet, Shifeng had received a full-fledged mana domain immediately after he had constructed his mana body. Apart from the full-fledged mana domain, what also surprised Shifeng was the improvement he received toward his mana perception, recovery speeds for stamina and concentration, and the toughness of his body. Even though a mana body didn't provide players with any increase in basic attributes, it still influenced a player's performance heavily as it provided non-statistical improvements such as mana perception, recovery speed, and physical toughness. Firstly, mana perception. Mana perception played an important role in players' ability to manipulate mana. Meanwhile, the better a player was at manipulating mana, the higher their skills and spells completion rates would be. Secondly, recovery speed. The greater a player's recovery speed was, the quicker they could recover the stamina and concentration they expended in battle. This, in turn, would increase the duration in which they could stay in the battle. Lastly, physical toughness. Physical toughness affected a player's ability to withstand attacks. Although physical toughness wouldn't reduce the amount of damage players took, it reduced players' chances of suffering physical injuries. If a player had sufficiently high physical toughness, an attack that should have originally caused a heavy injury might only end up causing a light injury. This was a significant difference as a light injury wouldn't hamper a player's performance, whereas a heavy injury would. If a player sorely lacked physical toughness, they might even lose their limbs to a powerful attack, severely affecting their combat performance. Currently, Shifeng could sense that his mana perception was already on par with what he had when he initially reached Tier 4 during his previous life. He could already clearly perceive the basic operating principles of the various elements of mana surrounding him. As for his recovery speed, it was double that of the advanced epic mana body. Even though he was only a Tier 3 Sword King right now, he could execute 6 extreme slashes, an advanced combat technique, without burden. As for his physical toughness, it was already on par with the physical toughness of the average Tier 4 mythic monster. Now, attacks at the Tier 3 standard couldn't even put a scratch on him, and only Tier 4 attacks could threaten him. This inherent mana domain saves me a lot of trouble. Shifeng couldn't help but smile as he manipulated his mana domain. His mana domain would only cover a 10-yard radius around him when he wasn't actively controlling it. However, once he actively controlled it, the mana domain could cover up to a 50-yard radius. While a 50-yard radius was below average for a full-fledged mana domain, it was more than enough for a Tier 3 player. This was because the maximum attack range of the average Tier 3 expert was only 50 yards. Meanwhile, his mana domain would weaken all enemies within its range by a certain extent. Originally, Shifeng had been having a headache trying to think of a way to help his students. His students were far too weak right now, and if he wanted them to be of any help to him, he needed to improve their combat standards. Only, improving their combat standards was easier said than done. Even though he had taught his students the refinement exercise, they couldn't reach the refinement realm solely by relying on the exercise. They needed to pair the exercise with lots of combat experience. If he still had the resources available to Zero Wing, he could have simply let his students participate in simulated battles against refinement realm experts and gain combat experience that way. This was also how the various superpowers trained their young talents. However, he was merely the ex-guild leader of a second-rate guild right now. He didn't have any training resources in his possession right now. Trying to mimic the training methods of superpowers was nothing but a dream. Thus, the only option available to him was to have his students partake in live combat. Before constructing his legendary mana body and acquiring a mana domain, Shifeng would have had difficulty creating a safe environment for his students to carry out live combat. However, now that he had a mana domain, that would no longer be a problem. So long as his students fought within his mana domain, he could control the flow of battle as he wished, thereby minimizing the risk of casualties. Meanwhile, when Shifeng was inspecting his new mana domain, he suddenly received a call from Wu Lingling. Everyone has gathered in the Blue Rose Bar already, Instructor Sure, Wu Lingling said as she looked at Shifeng through the video chat. Then, she worriedly asked, should I make some additional arrangements? Previously, Shifeng had already made it clear in his message that they would be challenging the Withered Ruins, the nearest level 100 regional dungeon to 100 Flow City. Unlike team dungeons, regional dungeons didn't have an entry limit. Players could enter the map by themselves or in massive teams. Meanwhile, not only did the monsters inside a regional dungeon provide ample EXP, but they also had much better loot than monsters found in the outside world. Thus, the Withered Ruins was the perfect place for 100 Flow City's experts to grind at. However, grinding at the Withered Ruins wasn't an easy task. Like team dungeons, regional dungeons could similarly be categorized by difficulty, with the first 3 difficulties being normal, hard, and hell. Among them, hard mode regional dungeons were already enough to deter the average Tier 3 team. Only teams made up of Tier 3 experts could cope in these dungeons. Meanwhile, the Withered Ruins was a hell mode regional dungeon. Even Tier 3 expert teams could face annihilation if they weren't careful inside. Typically, only the frontline teams of large guilds could operate with relative safety inside a hell mode regional dungeon. As for freshman students like themselves, they were almost guaranteed to die should they enter the Withered Ruins. If they wanted to grind inside the Withered Ruins, they would need to recruit the help of some frontline experts. After all, there was no way Shifeng could take care of everyone on the team. Shifeng chuckled at Wu Lingling's concern. Then, he said, since you've already gathered, fill your stomachs with some food and drinks. We'll meet up at the Withered Ruins entrance in 2 hours. Fighting in a regional dungeon is much more exhausting than fighting in the outside world, so you should also prepare some stamina and concentration recovery potions. After saying so, Shifeng disconnected the call, his words rendering Wu Lingling speechless. A female guardian knight wielding dark gold ranked buckler and clad in level 100 fine gold equipment happened to overhear Shifeng and Wu Lingling. In a worried voice, the female guardian knight asked, "Could instructor should be joking with us, class rep? The Withered Ruins is a hell mode regional dungeon. If we head there as we are now," previously, when the other students heard from Wu Lingling that they would be going to the Withered Ruins, they had reacted in joy and excitement. Hell mode regional dungeons were places where even ordinary expert teams dared not enter, and only the expert teams of powerful guilds and adventurer teams would set foot into it. Under normal circumstances, students like themselves wouldn't even dare harbor any thoughts of entering a hell mode regional dungeon. Even the advanced instructors of the God's Domain Academy wouldn't bring their students into one. After all, doing so would require them to hire a bunch of frontline experts as babysitters, and they definitely wouldn't be willing to foot such a cost for mere students. Thus, they were ecstatic when they first heard that Shifeng would be taking them into the Withered Ruins. Now, though, is instructor Shi trying to take a gamble? It's the freshman tournament tomorrow, and every instructor has to send 3 students out to fight as a team. I heard that the top 3 instructors would get to visit one of the secret pavilion's training branches. This is a rare opportunity even in our academy, a male assassin with a lean body suddenly said. Upon hearing this male assassin's words, realization immediately dawned upon the other students present. The secret pavilion was a transcendental existence in God's domain, and innumerable experts had originated from it. Even among super guilds, few were capable of rivaling the secret pavilion when it came to training talents. However, the secret pavilion would only ever train its own talents. Never did it allow the talents and experts of the various academies to join its training program. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU now, though, the secret pavilion was allowing the God's Domain Academy's instructors to visit one of its training branches. This was undoubtedly a rare opportunity for the academy's instructors. Meanwhile, it was already common knowledge that Shifeng had been Shadow's ex-guild leader and that he had failed to break out of Tier 3 even after many years of struggles. If he could participate in the secret pavilion's training session, he might finally achieve a breakthrough and reach Tier 4. Meanwhile, out of the 30 students apprenticed under Shifeng, only Wu Lingling was capable of ranking among the top of this year's freshmen. However, the freshman tournament was a team match. There was no way Wu Lingling could win the tournament by herself. She needed teammates that could be of help to her. Thus, Shifeng was taking them to the withered ruins and betting on the possibility that the other students might improve there. Alright, stop making blind guesses. Let's get ready and set out. When Wu Lingling saw her classmates starting to voice opinions about Shifeng's decision, she quickly stopped them in their tracks. Though, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry on the inside. If they were already complaining about grinding in the withered ruins, what would happen if she told them about the matter regarding the mana outpost? Chapter 2940, Entering Hell Mode for the First Time. Chapter 14, Entering Hell Mode for the first time. The withered ruins was a magnificent city surrounded by a dead forest. Currently, over 30 teams had gathered in front of the magic barrier that surrounded the dead forest. Every one of these teams had at least 100 members, with some having up to 200 members. Moreover, even the weakest player was equipped in level 100 dark gold set equipment, while the strongest was fully equipped in epic equipment. When Wu Lingling and the others first arrived before the withered ruins, they immediately felt an oppressive feeling enveloping their bodies. Right now, even a fool could tell that their group of students did not belong to this place. They stood out like a sore thumb when they stood among these expert players. Meanwhile, the arrival of Wu Lingling's group also attracted the attention of the many expert teams present. This was especially true for one particular 200-man team. After taking a glance at Wu Lingling's group, a woman clad in an exquisite robe and wielding a crystalline epic staff sneered and said, "What's a bunch of children like them doing here? What is their leader even thinking? Do they think that a Hell Mode regional dungeon is some playground for children?" The words of the woman attracted the approval of many of her team members. Like the woman, these people also looked at Wu Lingling with eyes full of contempt. While it was true that any player who met the level requirement could enter a Hell Mode team dungeon, it didn't mean anyone who met the level requirement should enter a Hell Mode team dungeon. After all, it wasn't without reason that Hell Mode team dungeons were known as leveling spots for expert players. There was no possibility that Wu Lingling and her teammates were experts disguised to look like university students, either. Although players could alter their character appearances in God's domain, they couldn't hide their age. Meanwhile, anyone could tell at a glance that Wu Lingling and her teammates were merely a bunch of students. Moreover, judging by how they moved, they were definitely a bunch of newbies who had entered God's domain only recently. With the combat standards they possessed, let alone putting up a fight, they couldn't flee for their lives should they enter the withered ruins. While the members of this 200-man team were having a hushed discussion about Wu Lingling's group, a middle-aged man clad in silver armor and wielding 2 tower shields also glanced at Wu Lingling's group. Then, he looked at his team members and said, "It's time. Get ready to enter." As soon as this middle-aged man spoke, everyone on the 200-man team promptly shut their mouths and readied themselves to enter the withered ruins. Even the woman wielding the crystalline epic staff dared not continue speaking. Instead, she took out a magic scroll from her bag and started casting a spell that increased everyone's basic attributes. Although their team had entered many Hell Mode regional dungeons before, those were dungeons found on the main continent. The miniature ancient world had a much harsher environment than the main continent, and the monsters here were much stronger. Since this was their first time entering a Hell Mode regional dungeon in the miniature ancient world, they had no idea exactly how powerful the monsters inside were. Thus, they dared not act recklessly. At the same time as this 200-man team started getting ready, the other teams present also began making their respective preparations. The behavior of these teams made it look like this 200-man team was their leader. The reason for everyone's reaction was simple. It was because this 200-man team had an extraordinary origin. Although this 200-man team consisted of only independent players, these players were all members of Soulfire, a top adventurer team in God's domain. Soulfire was an adventurer team that only appeared 5 years after the launch of God's domain. The adventurer team had started as a small group of several dozen players. Now, though, it had already become one of the top 50 adventurer teams on the eastern continent, its member count exceeding 200,000. Although Soulfire's member count was inferior to even third-rate guilds, every member qualified to join Soulfire was an expert capable of reaching the Trial Tower's 6th floor at the very least. Thus, Soulfire's overall strength rivaled even that of first-rate guilds. Moreover, the person leading Soulfire's 200-man team this time was none other than Southern Tiger, one of Soulfire's 16 captains and a half-step Tier 5 expert during his peak. Although Tier 5 players were labeled as apex existences in God's domain, the existence of Tier 5 players was incredibly rare. Tier 5 players were so rare that any one of them could instantly become the backbone of a first-rate guild should they choose to join one. In a situation where only a small portion of God's domain's players had chosen to enter the miniature ancient world, the existence of a half-step Tier 5 player was as rare as a phoenix's feather, let alone actual Tier 5 players. After all, not all players who had reached Tier 4 or higher possessed the courage to restart their progress from level 100, Tier 3. Meanwhile, even if everyone now had their tiers reduced to Tier 3, an expert who had once reached the half-step Tier 5 standard was still an existence worthy of everyone's respect. Move out! Southern Tiger bellowed as he looked toward the withered ruins. Immediately, Soulfire's 200-man team began marching toward the magic barrier that enveloped the regional dungeon. As for the other teams, they waited for around a minute after Soulfire's team disappeared before entering the dungeon themselves. Evidently, they planned on letting Soulfire test the waters and open the way for them. When all but Shifeng's students remained outside the withered ruins, Qin Wuchen couldn't help but turn toward Wu Lingling and asked, "What should we do now, class rep?" According to the information they found, it wasn't safe for players to enter the withered ruins whenever they wanted. This was due to the effects of the magic barrier enveloping the dungeon. On the surface, there was only one entrance into the withered ruins. However, in reality, the instant players walked through the magic barrier, they would be teleported to a random location inside the dungeon depending on their time of entry. Meanwhile, the current time just so happened to be when players were guaranteed to get teleported to the withered ruins outer region. Once players missed this safe period, they would have to either wait 6 hours for the next safe period or risk getting teleported to the withered ruins inner region. Even for current expert teams, a level 100 Hell Mode regional dungeon's outer region was a huge challenge, so getting teleported to the inner region would be an absolute nightmare. This was also why the many expert teams from before did not enter the withered ruins as soon as they arrived. Wu Lingling grew anxious when she heard Qin Wuchen's question. She had no idea what they should do right now. If they rashly entered the dungeon without Shifeng accompanying them, they would all but guarantee their deaths. Yet, if they didn't enter the dungeon now, they would have to wait for 6 more hours to do so. The miniature ancient world had been opened to players only recently, so now was the best time for players to grind for levels. It was also a crucial period for players to secure the many opportunities available in the miniature ancient world for themselves. Their group had already wasted a lot of time gathering up previously. If they wasted 6 more hours on top of that, they would certainly miss out on many opportunities. During the time Wu Lingling was stomping her feet out of anxiety, a figure slowly approached the group of students. Meanwhile, this figure belonged to none other than Shifeng. "What took you so long, Instructor Shi? The safe period is almost over. If we don't get ready to enter now, we'll have to wait here for another 6 hours. Wu Lingling immediately started complaining when she saw Shifeng approaching. Compared to the expert teams from before, students like themselves needed to make many more preparations before entering a Hell Mode regional dungeon. Not only would they need to cast all sorts of buffs on themselves, but they would also have to use various enhancement potions. Most importantly, they needed to sort out everyone's responsibilities and positionings in battle. Otherwise, they would only be getting themselves killed if they entered the withered ruins. Similar to Wu Lingling, everyone else on the team also couldn't help but grow nervous. Although everyone had previously been afraid and opposed Shifeng's decision to grind in the withered ruins, after arriving before the regional dungeon and seeing all those expert teams, they couldn't help but desire to compete with and grind at the same location as those expert teams. Thus, seeing Shifeng's late and unhurried arrival stimulated their nerves. Meanwhile, Shifeng chuckled when he saw the anxiety on his students' faces. Then, he said, "A Hell Mode regional dungeon isn't as tough as you imagine. You don't need any troublesome preparations, either. You bought the stamina recovery potions I asked you to, right? Have everyone take a bottle now, and let's enter the dungeon. Just 1 stamina recovery potion is enough." Wu Lingling couldn't help but doubt her ears when she heard Shifeng's words. The stamina recovery potion was an item sold in almost every potion shop in God's domain. Although the potion had an exorbitant price tag of 1 gold per bottle, it was a must-have item when grinding out in the fields. This was especially true in the miniature ancient world. However, apart from improving the user's stamina recovery rate, the potion provided no other benefits. Yet, Shifeng was now telling them that they only needed a stamina recovery potion to enter a Hell Mode regional dungeon. "Alright, hurry up. We're running out of time," Shifeng said after taking a look at the time. "What about the team's division of labor and positioning, Instructor Shi?" Qin Wuchen asked in an exasperated tone. A team's positioning and division of labor were the foundation of team battles. If everyone on the team didn't have a clear task, chaos would ensue once the battle began. In such a situation, the team would be fortunate if it could even exhibit 30% of its combat power. Meanwhile, Shifeng had not told them anything about their respective responsibilities when he gathered them before. Most of them had also only gotten acquainted with each other today, so they had no experience working together before. If they rashly entered the withered ruins under such circumstances, the consequences would be unimaginable. In response, Shifeng smiled and leisurely said, "We can do that after we are inside. You guys really don't need to stress yourselves out so much. It's just a Hell Mode regional dungeon." Shifeng's words rendered everyone speechless. Everyone also couldn't help but cast looks of contempt at their calm instructor. Even Wu Lingling was at the brink of tears when she heard Shifeng's words. This was a Hell Mode regional dungeon they were talking about. Even the various large guilds' expert teams wouldn't dare act recklessly inside such a dungeon. Yet, now, Shifeng spoke as if they were about to go and grind some common monsters at the beginner area. However, Shifeng paid no attention to the looks of contempt he received. After having his students stand in a group, he promptly walked into the withered ruins. Seeing this, Wu Lingling and the others had no choice but to follow Shifeng. Inwardly, they prayed that they wouldn't meet any monsters after entering the dungeon. The moment everyone stepped through the barrier, a bright light blinded them momentarily. Then, when their vision recovered, they found themselves standing on a hill a short distance away from the dilapidated city walls. Standing on top of the hill gave everyone a good view of their surroundings. They could see everything within a radius of several thousand yards. However, it was precisely because of this good field of view that Wu Lingling and the others couldn't help but gasp in shock. What? Wu Lingling and the others felt a chill crawling down their spines when they saw the half-orcs that covered the forest at the bottom of the hill. Demonized half-orc fighter, demonized creature, High Lord, level 100 HP 50 million, demonized half-orc warrior, demonized creature, Great Lord, level 100 HP 140 million. These demonized half-orcs were 5 to 6 meters tall, and ominous pitch-black runes covered their robust bodies. Moreover, every one of these half-orcs patrolled the dead forest in groups, with the smaller groups having over 200 half-orcs and the larger groups having over 500 half-orcs. To make matters worse, demonized half-orc warriors made up at least 20% of every one of these groups' numbers. However, what made these demonized half-orcs truly terrifying was the number of HP bars they had. Even weaker half-orc fighters had 5 HP bars. In God's domain, the number of HP bars a monster had also represented the combat standards they possessed. Meanwhile, a monster with 5 HP bars would possess combat standards rivaling ordinary expert players. If ordinary experts came across such a monster, they would have to take the long way around, as picking a fight with such a monster would only lead to their deaths. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yet, even the weakest demonized half-orc here had 5 HP bars, while the stronger ones had 7 HP bars. Let alone their team of 30 students, even the 200-man expert team they came across would suffer if they fought against these demonized half-orcs. Meanwhile, during the time Wu Lingling and the others were stunned by the sight before them, Shifeng suddenly said, "Alright, let's start grinding." Before Wu Lingling and the others could react, Shifeng picked up a small rock by his feet and threw it at a demonized half-orc warrior in the nearby forest, the rock transforming into a streak of light and accurately hitting the half-orc warrior's head. Immediately, the half-orc warrior that was struck turned to Shifeng's direction and let loose an angry roar, the roar inciting the other half-orcs nearby into a frenzy. Then, every one of these frenzied half-orcs turned their heads toward Shifeng's group. Chapter 29:41, Unfolded Mana Domain. Chapter 15, Unfolded Mana Domain. When the demonized half-orcs turned to look at Shifeng, time on top of the hill seemingly froze as Wu Lingling and the others stopped moving, expressions of shock and horror coloring their faces. This was Shifeng's so-called grinding. Even the weakest demonized half-orc was a level 100 High Lord. In terms of basic attributes, they were superior to even level 100, Tier 3 experts fully equipped in dark gold equipment. Adding on their combat standards that rivaled ordinary experts, even veteran Tier 3 expert players would have difficulty fighting these monsters. Not to mention, there were also plenty of Great Lord-ranked half-orc warriors among the group of half-orcs, and these monsters possessed even stronger basic attributes and combat standards. Even a large guild's expert team would have to set up traps and magic arrays beforehand when going up against such a frightening group of monsters. Yet, now, Shifeng wanted them to fight these monsters with no preparations whatsoever. This situation was simply absurd. Before Wu Lingling and the others could recover from their shock, Shifeng nonchalantly told them, "Each of you pick a target, lure it aside, and think of a way to beat it. Remember to stay within 100 yards of me at all times." Upon hearing Shifeng's words, Wu Lingling couldn't help herself from asking, "What about the other monsters, Instructor Shi?" Immediately, the other students looked toward Shifeng as well, curious to know the answer. Everyone had selectively chosen to ignore the part where Shifeng required them to each lure a monster away. For them, accomplishing such an action wasn't at all difficult. The truly troublesome part was the remaining several hundred demonized half-orcs, particularly the Great Lord-ranked half-orc warriors. Normally, it would take several Tier 3 experts working together to defeat even one of these monsters. "Leave the rest to me," Shifeng calmly replied. However, despite Shifeng's calm and gentle tone, his words stunned everyone present. Even Wu Lingling, who believed in Shifeng's strength, couldn't help but be surprised. Under normal circumstances, even a Tier 4 player wouldn't dare to fight against a large number of Great Lords unless they possessed a significant advantage in basic attributes. After all, there was strength in numbers. Not to mention, monsters in God's domain typically knew how to work together in battle. With their high HP, they could exhaust and kill a Tier 4 player without any problems. Currently, let alone having an advantage in basic attributes, Shifeng didn't even have an advantage in tiers or levels. Yet, he spoke as if the approaching monsters were a bunch of insignificant creatures. During the time everyone was in a daze, the 300-plus demonized half-orcs had already arrived within 60 yards of the team. This was already a dangerous distance for both ranged and melee Tier 3 players. "Alright, get ready," Shifeng said, bringing everyone back to reality. Immediately, the students instinctively moved into battle positions and began choosing their respective half-orc fighters. Sacred Punishment, Starlight Arrow, Shadow Chaser, Thunder Howl. Wu Lingling and the other 29 students used their skills on their respective targets one after another, aggroing the monsters. Then, following Shifeng's instructions, they spread out, lured the monsters away from the main group, and started fighting against these 30 half-orc fighters. As to whether they could defeat these half-orc fighters, none of them cared about that now. After all, no matter how their individual battles turned out, they were destined to lose this battle. Subsequently, the rest of the demonized half-orcs started moving closer and closer to Shifeng. 50 yards. 40 yards. 30 yards. As the main group of half-orcs moved closer and closer to Shifeng, Wu Lingling and the others also grew more and more nervous. Even the ground trembled at the charge of the 5-meter-tall half-orc fighters. The mana in the air had even turned violent, causing Wu Lingling and the others to experience a suffocating sensation. However, what made this group of demonized half-orcs truly terrifying wasn't their individual prowess. When the half-orcs were within 30 yards of Shifeng, they suddenly split into two groups and encircled Shifeng. Over 30 half-orc warriors also took the lead in attacking Shifeng from all directions, leaving no gaps for Shifeng to escape through. Wu Lingling's complexion paled at this scene. She did not expect the half-orcs to behave in such a manner. Normally, monsters that had reached level 100 in God's domain would gain a certain degree of intelligence and no longer mindlessly attack players. Instead, they would first probe their opponent's strength and target their opponent's weak points. When faced with such a reckless assault, even a Tier 4 player would have to rely on their superior basic attributes and physique to evade the monster's attacks. If they tried clashing head-on, they would certainly suffer injuries and maybe even get killed. After all, even a Tier 4 player would still take a lot of damage if they received an attack from a Tier 3 Great Lord, let alone a Tier 3 player. While Shi Feng indeed possessed combat standards and techniques that left even Gan Yuan in admiration, he was only a Tier 3 Sword King right now. Moreover, the gear he currently had on him was the default equipment players received when creating a new character in the miniature ancient world. He couldn't afford to make even the slightest mistake when going up against the 30-plus Great Lords with such parameters. Otherwise, death would instantly claim him. Contrasting Wu Lingling's reaction, Shi Feng remained calm even in the face of the half-orc warrior's frenzied assault. It looked as if he hadn't noticed the approaching half-orc warriors. Instead of hastily taking evasive maneuvers, he simply took a small step forward. Shi Feng's action looked incredibly natural and gentle. However, the instant Shi Feng's right foot touched the ground, Wu Lingling and the other students were immediately stunned. Suddenly, the space around Shi Feng had seemingly frozen as all of the half-orc warriors charging at him had stopped moving simultaneously. Although these half-orc warriors quickly started moving again, their movements had become much more sluggish and awkward than before. It looked as if these monsters were trying to maneuver inside a muddy swamp. However, what surprised Wu Lingling and the others the most was the mana surrounding Shi Feng. Previously, the demonized half-orc's presence had caused the ambient mana to grow violent. Now, though, none of the demonized half-orcs present were able to influence the mana surrounding them. Moreover, the density of the ambient mana had increased to a point where it had condensed into mist. A mana domain. Qin Wuchen couldn't help but rub his eyes in disbelief when he saw this scene from nearby. Most players in God's domain had trouble improving even the quality of the mana within their own bodies, let alone altering the mana around them. Of course, that wasn't to say that players couldn't accomplish such a feat. One method players could use to accomplish this feat was to set up a magic array to alter an area's mana composition and improve it. However, such magic arrays required many players to operate, with some even requiring the efforts of dozens of players. Apart from magic arrays, there was only one other method players could utilize: mana domains. Normally, players would have to reach the peak of Tier 4 before they even had a chance of creating a mana domain of their own. Even then, the players who managed to acquire a mana domain at Tier 4 were still few and far between. Meanwhile, acquiring a mana domain at Tier 3 was a feat of legend. Any player who managed to create a mana domain at Tier 3 would be invincible among those below Tier 4. However, before Qin Wuchen and the others could recover from their shock, Shi Feng had already started his attack. Normally, swordsmen would try to avoid fighting against groups of enemies since the swordsman class focused more on single-target combat than group combat. However, Shi Feng did not back down from the half-orc warrior's charge. Unsheathing his two swords, Shi Feng charged at the oncoming half-orc warriors without hesitation. The demonized half-orc warriors were 6-meter-tall giants wielding greatswords of similar sizes to them. Whether it was Shi Feng or the long swords he wielded, both looked tiny and harmless in comparison. Yet, when Shi Feng's long swords clashed with the half-orc warriors' greatswords, the greatswords had shockingly altered their trajectories from Shi Feng and struck the half-orc fighters near them instead. -734,644. -1,432,154. -713,464. Immediately, damage values in the hundreds of thousands appeared above some of the half-orc fighters' heads, some even exceeding 1 million. All of a sudden, the half-orc warriors had gone from being formidable enemies into becoming weapons for Shi Feng. Moreover, the damage output of each of these weapons far exceeded the damage output of the average Tier 3 expert party. It should be noted that the monsters in the miniature ancient world possessed much tougher bodies than monsters on the main continent. A Tier 3 Berserker fully geared in level 100 Dark Gold equipment would be fortunate to cause 40,000 damage to a level 100 High Lord with their normal attacks. Even if the Berserker used a Tier 3 skill, he would, at most, cause around 100,000 damage. However, Tier 3 skills and spells had cooldowns, and most Tier 3 players would only have a handful of Tier 3 skills and spells in their arsenal. It was impossible for players to continuously attack using Tier 3 skills and spells. Thus, a 6-man party would need a long time to defeat even a level 100 High Lord. Yet, now, Shifeng needed less than a minute to defeat a demonized half-orc fighter. Every attack Shifeng redirected from a half-orc warrior would hit at least 3 half-orc fighters. As a result, the half-orc fighter's 50 million HP could be seen rapidly decreasing. Even though these demonized half-orcs possessed frightening recovery and could regenerate 2% of their HP every 5 seconds, the amount of HP they recovered was nothing in the face of Shifeng's damage output. How is this possible? This scene momentarily stupefied Wu Lingling. As the younger sister of Wu Xiaoxiao, the God's Domain Academy's top talent, she had watched many spars between the experts of first-rate guilds before. She had also watched Tier 4 experts grinding out in the fields before. However, none of those experts could manipulate 30-plus great lords and use them as their puppets like Shifeng. The degree of awareness and control Shifeng had over his surroundings was simply astounding. Even powerful great lords were nothing but a joke in front of him. However, what Wu Lingling didn't know was that while a mana domain could indeed grant players a significant advantage in manipulating their surroundings, if the difference in basic attributes was too significant, even a mana domain would be of no use. Meanwhile, the demonized half-orc warrior's basic attributes wasn't exceptional among great lords of the same level. On the contrary, the half-orc warriors had average basic attributes for great lords. Rather than basic attributes, the part that made them difficult opponents was their combat standards. Meanwhile, a competition of combat standards was the thing that Shifeng worried about the least. Thus, he could toy with these demonized half-orcs as if he were messing around with puppets. If Shifeng were to go up against great lords with basic attributes rivaling grand lords, though, even he would have no choice but to evade the monster's attacks. He would simply be seeking a quick death if he tried to divert their attacks. After Shifeng fought for some time, he took a glance at Wu Lingling and the others. Then, he said in the team chat, "Don't just look at me. Pay attention to your targets. Although I am suppressing the mobility and basic attributes of these demonized half-orcs with my mana domain, their combat instincts remain unaffected. Their basic attributes are also not at a level where you can casually block their attacks. I won't be able to save you if you get hit." Upon hearing Shifeng's reminder, Wu Lingling and the others quickly snapped out of their daze and focused their attention on the half-orc fighters in front of them. Sweat had also started covering their foreheads as reality dawned upon them. They had been so shocked by Shifeng's mana domain just now that they had forgotten that it only helped in weakening the enemy, it didn't prevent one from taking damage. Not to mention, this mana domain didn't even belong to them, so it didn't provide them with any performance enhancements. Shifeng might have stabilized the situation on his side already, but what about them? What should they do against their respective opponents? They were talking about a level 100 High Lord in the miniature ancient world here. Even frontline Tier 3 experts had difficulty fighting a one-on-one battle against a level 100 High Lord. What could students like themselves, who couldn't even be considered experts, do against such an opponent? Don't panic. The maximum reach of these half-orc fighters' normal attacks is 12 yards, and they can only attack up to 6 times in a row. Afterward, they will fall into a brief moment of stagnation to catch their breath. Their speed is no match for yours, neither is their reaction speed. Use this knowledge to find opportunities to attack. While the many students wondered how they should fight against the demonized half-orc fighters before them, Shifeng's voice rang in their ears once more. An attack range of 12 yards and a maximum attack count of 6. Qin Wuchen's eyes brightened when he heard Shifeng's advice, the worry on his face lessening. The scariest part about fighting monsters in God's domain was not knowing the limits of a monster. In God's domain, Monsters possessed intelligence and were afraid of death. Thus, they would hide their strength in battle, only exposing their limits when necessary. In a way, this was similar to how players fought. Normally, Qin Wuchen and the others would gradually probe the limits of the monsters they fought over the course of the battle. However, they dared not conduct such casual probings with the demonized half-orc fighters since the other party possessed far superior basic attributes. They would die if they made a mistake. However, now that they knew about the half-orc fighters' limits, their confidence grew. It was akin to having a lamp shine on them as they were walking down a dark road. They now knew what they should do to achieve victory. Subsequently, the students began maintaining a 12-yard gap between themselves and their opponents, preventing any of the half-orc fighters' normal attacks from reaching them. Now, they only had to pay attention to when the half-orc fighters used their skills. The half-orc fighters' movements when using skills were vastly different from when they were attacking normally. Thus, it was very easy to tell when they were attacking with a skill. All the students needed to do was figure out how they should dodge these skills. For a time, the students, who were originally at an absolute disadvantage, began holding their ground against the demonized half-orc fighters, neither side getting the better over the other. The more talented of the bunch had even started retaliating against the half-orc fighters, inflicting some damage to the High Lords. Of these talented students, Wu Lingling's performance stood out the most. She grew braver and more excited with every passing moment. Although Wu Lingling had previously sparred with the experts of her elder sister's guild, those experiences did very little in helping her improve. Even though the experts she fought had matched their basic attributes with hers, there was simply too huge a gap in combat standards and techniques. Thus, she could never last more than a few moves against these experts. However, it was a different story for the demonized half-orc fighter before her. Currently, the High Lord was no match for her in terms of reaction speed and mobility, so she could see its movements with perfect clarity. The half-orc fighter's combat standard was also only superior to hers by a small margin, so she could quickly discern her flaws through the half-orc fighter's attacks. As the battle progressed, Wu Lingling could tell that she was improving. Subsequently, time passed by quickly. After battling continuously for several hours and killing several groups of demonized half-orcs, Shifeng and the others saw their experience bars rising by 15% or more. The half-orc warriors they killed had also dropped plenty of equipment. Originally, Wu Lingling and the others weren't particularly interested in the equipment dropped. After all, the demonized half-orc warriors only dropped level 100 secret silver equipment. Meanwhile, every one of them was fully equipped in level 100 fine gold equipment, with some even fully equipped in dark gold equipment. Thus, the half-orc warriors' loot held no significance to them. However, when Shifeng shared the statistics of the weapons and equipment dropped, everyone's eyes immediately turned red with desire. Crap! These things buff mana affinity. Qin Wuchen was greatly shocked when he saw the statistics of the level 100 secret silver weapons and equipment Shifeng shared. In the current God's domain, even epic weapons and equipment rarely had attributes that increased the user's mana affinity. Yet, now, even the secret silver equipment the demonized half-orc warriors dropped could increase players' mana perception and mana affinity. Although these secret silver weapons and equipment was a measly 5% improvement to mana perception and mana affinity, they could probably sell for more than even level 100 dark gold weapons. Some people might even be willing to trade level 100 epic weapons for these secret silver weapons and equipment. After all, mana was everything in God's domain. There were many people in God's domain who'd be willing to spill blood just to acquire a piece of equipment that improved mana affinity. Depending on the item's quality, some guilds were even willing to wage war with each other. This was because a boost in mana perception and mana affinity could make it much easier for players to ascend through the tiers. Now that such an effect had appeared on a bunch of level 100 secret silver weapons and equipment, how could Qin Wuchen not be shocked? Meanwhile, after taking a glance at the dozen or so secret silver weapons and equipment, Shifeng said to his students, "There isn't a significant difference in basic attributes between secret silver and fine gold equipment. I recommend that you swap out your fine gold equipment for this secret silver equipment. These things should be of much greater help to you in improving your techniques." To be honest, Even Shifeng was surprised that the Withered Ruins monsters could drop such weapons and equipment. If the outside world were to find out about this, the various large guilds would flood the regional dungeon. They might even lock down the area to monopolize these items. Upon hearing Shifeng's words, the students quickly allocated the loot and replaced their old equipment. Then, the group of students continued following Shifeng into the Withered Ruins inner region, slaughtering any demonized half-orcs they came across on the way. Because of their increase in magic affinity, Wu Lingling and the others saw a visible improvement in the completion rate of their skills and spells. They could also move their bodies much more naturally, which, in turn, improved their combat standards. After battling for over 10 hours, Shifeng and the others arrived in front of the city wall that separated the Withered Ruins' inner and outer regions. Apart from Shifeng's team of 31 players, there was another team of 200 players resting a short distance away. Meanwhile, this 200-man team was none other than the Soulfire adventurer team Wu Lingling and the others encountered at the Withered Ruins entrance. Soulfire's members were currently huddled around campfires, eating and drinking to recover their stamina and concentration. It was evident that they planned to head to the inner region to grind. When Shifeng's team arrived at the inner region's entrance, they immediately attracted the attention of Soulfire's members. When the woman wielding the crystalline epic staff saw Shifeng's team, a look of surprise flashed across her face, and she couldn't help but mutter, "How is this possible?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What's wrong, Rain? Southern Tiger, who had been resting with his eyes shut, asked when he heard the woman's words. Captain, look at them, the woman named Moon Rain said as she pointed at Shifeng's team. Hearing this, Southern Tiger followed Moon Rain's finger and looked over to Shifeng's team. Immediately, surprise flashed across Southern Tiger's eyes. Level 101. Chapter 2942, Tier 5 Existence. Chapter 2. 016, Tier 5 Existence. In front of the wall that led to the Withered Ruins inner region, Southern Tiger, Moon Rain, and the other members of Soulfire couldn't help but be shocked when they saw Shifeng's team. Level 101. How can their team reach this place? Questions appeared in the minds of Soulfire's members one after another. Some of them even rubbed their eyes, thinking that they were hallucinating. Captain, could they be monsters disguised as players? Moon Rain asked in a quiet voice as she warily looked at Shifeng's team. Moon Rain had scrutinized Wu Lingling and the other students at the dungeon's entrance, so she knew what kind of combat standards they possessed. Let alone reaching the Withered Ruins inner region, these students would be fortunate if they could last even half an hour in the outer region. Yet, now, not only did Wu Lingling and the others reach the inner region's entrance, but they had even managed to level up within this short period. Moreover, none of them looked to be in a miserable state. No matter how Moon Rain looked at this situation, she couldn't help but find it unbelievable. Instances of monsters disguising themselves as players were not unheard of, and monsters capable of such disguises were incredibly dangerous in God's domain. This was because these monsters were not only highly intelligent, but they were also capable of devouring players. Meanwhile, players that were devoured would not only be prevented from logging into the game for half a month, but they would also permanently lose a small portion of their basic attributes. To make matters worse, even high-ranking identification skills did not work on these monsters. One would need a top-tier identification skill to see through their disguises. Meanwhile, out of the 200 players in their team, only Southern Tiger owned a top-tier identification skill. No, they are indeed the people we met at the entrance. They aren't disguised monsters, Southern Tiger said, shaking his head. Then, in a confused voice, he continued, I'm not sure if my senses are playing tricks on me, but I feel that they have undergone a slight transformation since we last met them. Transformation? Moon Rain started paying closer attention to Wu Lingling and the others after hearing Southern Tiger's words. Is it their equipment? Southern Tiger was one of Soulfire's 16 captains. While he might not be the strongest captain, he was the best when judging people. If Southern Tiger said that a person had changed, it was almost certainly true. However, even after scrutinizing Wu Lingling and the others for some time, Moon Rain failed to see any substantial change in these students. Apart from their levels, The only difference she could see in these students was their equipment. Moreover, it wasn't a positive change, but a negative one instead. Initially, these students had been fully equipped with fine gold and dark gold weapons and equipment. Yet, now, many of them had secret silver weapons and equipment mixed in their gear. If Moonrain was meeting these students for the first time, she would have mistakenly assumed that they were players who had recreated their accounts. It's not their equipment. It's their attitude that has changed, Southern Tiger said. Then, after taking a moment to think, he continued, yes. It's their composure. Every one of them looks much more composed now than before. Composure. Moonrain took another look at Wu Lingling and the others. Thanks to Southern Tiger's hint, realization quickly hit her. If Moonrain were to equate the students she saw at the dungeon's entrance as frightened rabbits, the students she was looking at now were akin to seasoned hunters. Even after arriving at the inner region's entrance, Wu Lingling and the others behaved calmly and showed no sense of crisis. Meanwhile, this was a strange sight no matter how Moonrain looked at it. The Withered Ruins was a hell mode regional dungeon. Even frontline experts would need to remain at high alert when roaming in the dungeon's outer region, let alone the area close to the inner region's entrance. Even their team was no exception. Although they were currently resting in front of the inner region's entrance, none of them had loosened their guard. This was because even the slightest mistake could lead to the annihilation of their team, which would, in turn, waste all of the efforts they had put into grinding previously. However, Wu Lingling and the others currently behaved as if they were on a sightseeing trip. None of them showed any signs of crisis whatsoever. Maybe they didn't encounter any monsters on the way here? Moonrain asked. The change in the behavior of Wu Lingling's group was simply too unbelievable. No matter how she racked her mind, she couldn't figure out what gave these students the confidence to behave so calmly in front of the dangerous inner region's entrance. The only reasonable explanation Moonrain could come up with was that these students had not encountered any monsters on the way here. After all, players would be teleported to a random location when they entered the dungeon. It might be possible that Wu Lingling and the others had been teleported to a safe location, thus explaining their calm behavior. However, Southern Tiger couldn't help but roll his eyes at Moonrain when he heard her words. Then, he said, if they didn't encounter any monsters, do you think they could reach level 101 before us? Ah, you're right. Moonrain immediately realized the flaw in her explanation. However, this outcome only served to further confuse her. But how can they reach this place so quickly with their strength? We have a 200-man team while their team only has 31 players. Moreover, every one of them is so weak. Although the Withered Ruins teleportation was random, those teleported to the outer region wouldn't be transported anywhere close to the inner region. Moreover, the closer one got to the inner region, the more monsters one would encounter. Moonrain found it hard to believe that a team as weak and small as Wu Lingling's group could reach the inner region's entrance so quickly. My guess is that it is related to that male swordsman, Southern Tiger said as he shifted his gaze to Shifeng. Then, a hint of fighting spirit appeared in his eyes as he continued, "It's been a long time since I came across such a powerful expert. I didn't think I would actually meet one in the miniature ancient world." Moonrain followed Southern Tiger's gaze and looked at Shifeng as well. However, when she saw Shifeng's terrible equipment and sensed his lack of presence, she couldn't help but grow confused and asked, "He's an expert?" Even the average Tier 4 expert could easily secure themselves a full set of level 100 epic equipment when they entered a miniature ancient world, let alone someone capable of being regarded as an expert by Southern Tiger. In God's domain, anyone Southern Tiger regarded as an expert would be at the half-step Tier 5 standard at the very least. Meanwhile, such experts were existences capable of serving as the cornerstones of first-rate guilds. These existences could easily get a 1,000-man expert team to help them level up should they choose to do so. Yet, what about Shifeng? Not only was he geared in secret silver equipment, but the team he led only had 31 players. To make matters worse, his teammates were nothing but children with immature combat standards. If she were to tell others that a half-step Tier 5 expert was using such equipment and leading such a team, others would probably call her out as crazy. "It's normal that you can't tell." Real experts will never show their true colors. Whether it is their killing intent or aura, they will only reveal these things when they take action, as this is a sign that they have perfect control over their bodies, Southern Tiger said, chuckling when he saw Moon Rain's skepticism. Seeing that he can conceal his aura to such an extent, I'm guessing that his combat standard might be at the level of Blue Smiles. How is that possible? Moon Rain couldn't help but look at Southern Tiger skeptically. Not only was Blue Smile Soulfire's honorary elder, but she was also a Tier 5 Guardian Knight. She was one of Soulfire's strongest combatants, and her combat standard had already reached an inhuman level. So, Moon Rain found it unbelievable that an expert of Blue Smile's caliber had entered the miniature ancient world and was even grinding together with a bunch of children. Seeing that Moon Rain still doubted him, Southern Tiger did not try to persuade her further. This was because even he wasn't sure about his conjecture. After all, Tier 5 experts were esteemed individuals in God's domain. These experts were typically busy searching for ways of getting promoted to Tier 6. There was no way they would casually abandon their past achievements to enter the miniature ancient world. Meanwhile, during the time Moon Rain and Southern Tiger were conversing with each other, Shifeng's group had also arrived in front of the city wall that measured several dozen meters in height. Then, when Wu Lingling and the other students saw Soulfire's team resting in front of the wall, every one of them grew ecstatic. Instructor Shi is amazing. We actually caught up to Soulfire's exploration progress. I'm definitely going to boast about this to my old classmates. I'm not dreaming, right? We out-leveled Soulfire's team. Previously, when Wu Lingling and the others had been continuously slaughtering demonized half-orcs with Shifeng and refining their combat standards, they already knew that their leveling speed had surpassed that of the average expert. However, they never thought that their leveling speed would surpass Soulfire's team. However, before everyone could get too excited, Shifeng suddenly said, "Everyone, quiet down. It's getting late, so we will log off here for today. We'll proceed to the inner region after the Academy's enrollment ceremony, so make sure to rest up." When everyone heard Shifeng's words, they couldn't help but grumble in complaint. They felt that it was still too early to rest. After all, they were still brimming with energy, and there were still 2 hours left until the enrollment ceremony. So, they eagerly suggested that they enter the inner region now. By doing so, not only could they enter the inner region before Soulfire's team, but they could even hone their techniques against stronger monsters. However, Shifeng shot down every one of his students' suggestions. Players in God's domain might be able to mitigate their fatigue using stamina and concentration recovery potions, but these items did not reduce the mental stress they experienced. After grinding continuously for so many hours, everyone's minds had long since entered an incredibly tense state. If he let his students fight in such a state, they wouldn't achieve any significant improvements. Rather than wasting time trying to achieve negligible improvements, it'd be better if everyone got some rest now. That way, they would be able to explore the inner region with much greater efficiency afterward. Faced with Shifeng's rejection, Wu Lingling and the others had no choice but to log out and rest. After all, they'd be committing suicide if they insisted on going into the inner region without Shifeng. After seeing all 30 of his students log out, Shifeng chose to rest as well. Today would be the first day he officially began his duties as one of the God's Domain Academy's instructors. After all, he could no longer act with as much freedom as he did in his previous life. However, as the mansion Shifeng lived in was quite distant from the God's Domain Academy, by the time he arrived, there were only 15 minutes left until the enrollment ceremony began. He had just barely arrived on time. Originally, Shifeng didn't think much of the enrollment ceremony. However, when he entered Jinhai University's indoor arena, he couldn't help but be surprised by the scale of the enrollment ceremony. What's going on? At this time, not only were there over 1,000 students standing in the arena, but there were also many executives of first and second-rate guilds seated on the spectator stands. Based on the seating arrangements, there should be at least 30 guilds present. Rather than an enrollment ceremony, it looked more like a fighting competition was being held here. Meanwhile, when Shifeng arrived at the seats reserved for instructors, the several dozen instructors present immediately turned to look at Shifeng and began a quiet discussion among themselves. "So, here's Shifeng. The ex-guild leader of Shadow? I didn't think he would dare show himself. Does he not know that Gu Iren is attending the ceremony in person today? Maybe he thinks that Wu Lingling can win against Gu Iren's cousin. She is one of the few freshmen capable of rivaling Gu Tong, after all. He must be dreaming. Wu Lingling might stand a chance in a one-on-one fight, but the competition is a team battle. Gu Tong has 2 other talented freshmen on his team, while Wu Lingling has nobody. There is no way Wu Lingling can hold off 3 people by herself. I heard that Gu Iren has personally come here to watch his cousin secure the championship for the freshman competition today. If Gu Tong secures the championship, he will become an unofficial internal member of Shadow and get the opportunity to visit the Secret Pavilion's branch headquarters. Many of the instructors present secretly ridiculed Shifeng for his shamelessness and overestimating himself when they saw him attending the enrollment ceremony. After all, even though he had already been dismissed from Shadow, he still planned to rely on Wu Lingling, whom Shifeng had tricked into becoming his student, to increase his reputation. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Meanwhile, Luo Qiancheng couldn't help but smirk gleefully when he thought of what was to come. Let's see how you embarrass yourself when you try to compare with guild leader Gu. Amidst the various instructors' quiet discussions, the God's Domain Academy's enrollment ceremony officially began. After the Academy's director finished her speech, the executives of the various attending guilds also went up the stage to give a short speech. The sweet promises these executives made excited the freshmen present, and many of them couldn't help but wish they could join these large guilds immediately. Meanwhile, after the various guild executives finished their speeches, the highly anticipated freshman competition also officially began. Immediately, the mood in the arena soared to its peak. Instructor Shi, did you properly read the competition rules I emailed you? At this time, Lin Yaoyu, who was wearing a black suit that emphasized her enchanting body, approached Shifeng and asked in confusion, "Are you sure you want to let Wu Lingling participate by herself?" Chapter 2943 Chapter 2.017 One Person. Chapter 2943 Chapter 2.017 One Person. Although Lin Yaoyu had spoken softly, the instructors present were seated nearby. Moreover, Lin Yaoyu's existence in the God's Domain Academy was akin to a celebrity. No matter where she appeared, she would become the center of attention of every instructor. Thus, the instructors present all heard Lin Yaoyu's words clearly. For a time, every instructor present couldn't help but feet their line of sight toward Feng, surprise and confusion in their eyes. His sending only Wu Lingling? What is he trying to do? Did he not read the rules properly? Does he think it's going to be one-on-one fights? Most of the instructors present had done some research on Feng's situation. On one side, there was Feng, Shadow's dismissed guild leader. On the other side, there was Gu Iren, Shadow's newly promoted guild leader. Since Gu Iren was here to show support to his younger cousin Gu Tong in the freshman compet. Taion, the compet. Taion could be said to be Feng's best opportunity to one-up Gu Iren and show his worth in the God's Domain Academy. Feng even had the necessary conditions to achieve this goal. So long as he paired the incredibly talented Wu Lingling with 2 other talented students, he would have a high chance to win against Gu Iren. Yet, now, Feng was letting Wu Lingling partake. IP8 by herself? It should be known that Wu Lingling and Gu Tong had similar results in the entrance evaluation. Both had reached the trial tower's 5th floor early stage. So, the 2 could be regarded as evenly matched, and it wouldn't be strange for any of them to win against each other. Although Gu Tong's teammates were stronger than any of Feng's other students, Wu Lingling still had a winning chance so long as she had reliable teammates to support her. Although the compet. Taion's rules did not state that partic. IP8ing teams needed to have 3 members, sending a one-man team to partic. IP8 was no different from forfeiting the compet. Taion. Instructor Luo, do you think that Instructor got scared after experiencing Guild Leader Gu's frightening aura? A young junior instructor sitting beside Luo Qiancheng asked. Then, he smirked and continued, even if he's unwilling to embarrass himself and forfeit the match, there's no need to have Wu Lingling partic. IP8 by herself. If Wu Xiaoxiao learns of this, his career as an instructor will probably come to an end. Everyone capable of enrolling into the GODS Domain Academy possessed a certain degree of talent. Even if Wu Lingling was superior to her peers, she hadn't reached a level where she could fight multiple opponents by herself. Not to mention, having teammates meant that one could execute many more strategic maneuvers. Thus, Wu Lingling would face an overwhelming defeat even if she fought in a 2-on-1 matchup, let alone a 3-on-1 matchup. Wu Xiaoxiao, one of the GODS Domain Academy's brightest students, definitely wouldn't be willing to watch her little sister suffer a miserable defeat. Even if everyone could understand the reason for Wu Lingling's miserable defeat, it still wouldn't sound nice when others talked about it. Meanwhile, if a top student like Wu Xiaoxiao tried to seek justice for this matter, the academy would probably fire SHI plus Feng without hesitation. After all, SHI plus Feng was merely a newly hired junior instructor. In regards to this situation, Luo Tiancheng glanced at SHI plus Feng and sneered, saying, "You can't say that about instructor SHI plus. Who knows? Instructor SHI plus might be aiming to replicate senior instructor Chi's achievement several semesters ago and make a name for himself in this freshman compet. Taion. How is that possible? Instructor Chi was in charge of the academy's golden duo at the time. Although Wu Lingling is a genius in her own right, she is still only one person," the young junior instructor said, shaking his head. However, he also understood that Luo Tiancheng was trying to ridicule SHI plus Feng, so he didn't continue detailing the matter. In reality, there had been many past instances where instructors would send only 1 or 2 students to represent them in the freshman compet. Taion. However, out of the many instructors who did so, only instructor Chi had ever secured the champions. HI plus P. Moreover, his achievement was largely attributed to his 2 students being twins. Not only did these twins have incredible talent, but they also had extraordinary coordination. Thus, they managed to win despite fighting in 2-on-3 matchups. However, Wu Lingling's situation was different. She didn't even have someone to rely on, let alone a twin sibling. In such a situation, she wouldn't even get through the preliminary round, let alone winning against Jiyu Tong's team of 3. In the meantime, SHI plus Feng ignored the discussions taking place around him and calmly nodded to Lin Yaoyu, saying, just her. It won't be interesting if I send too many. It won't be interesting? Lin Yaoyu was momentarily stunned when she heard SHI plus Feng's answer. Her mind failed to comprehend what SHI plus Feng was trying to say. As for the instructors seated nearby, they laughed when they heard SHI plus Feng's answer. It won't be interesting if he sends too many. Does he think it's interesting to watch 3 people gang up on one person, then? Could he be insane? I don't know whether instructor SHI plus is insane, but I do know he'll go insane once Wu Xiaoxiao finds out about this. The many instructors present discussed and laughed over SHI plus Feng's words. Some instructors also started to look forward to the end of the compet. Taion. After all, nobody in the academy had ever seen Wu Xiaoxiao go berserk before. However, they might just get the opportunity to see it this time. While a commotion was taking place over the instructors' seating area, the academy's dean also officially announced the start of the freshman compet. Taion. The compet. Taion's format was simple. There were 6 virtual gaming pods prepared in the center of the arena, and partic. IP-8ing teams would fight each other in the virtual realm. There was also a holographic screen projected above the gaming pods to allow spectators to see the fights. Partic. IP ants would automatically receive a virtual body with a level 100, Tier 3 physique and weapons and equipment of similar quality when they entered the virtual realm. Afterward, all they needed to do was select their class, and they would be automatically teleported into a randomized battlefield that spanned a radius of 200 yards. Unlike the professional league, the freshman compet. Taion was a contest of skills and tactics. Meanwhile, after the dean explained the compet. Taion rules, He also revealed the list of Partic IP-8ing students and their respective teams. Then, when Wu Lingling saw the teammates she had, or lack thereof, she couldn't help but have a huge headache. Is Instructor SHI Plus insane? Wu Lingling was a little stunned when she saw that SHI Plus Feng's team only had her name in it. Although she had long since known that she would be chosen to Partic IP-8 in the compet Tion, she never thought she would do so without even a single support. As soon as Wu Lingling snapped out of her daze, she immediately tried to call SHI Plus Feng and ask him why he was having her Partic IP-8 by herself. Wu Lingling admitted that her combat standard had improved significantly after her training session in the Withered Ruins. He had also learned many evasive maneuvers from SHI Plus Feng, which elevated her dodging standard to a whole new level. However, she hadn't gotten so arrogant as to think she could go up against 3 opponents simultaneously. Even if all 3 of her opponents were freshmen capable of only reaching the trial tower's 4th floor, it didn't matter. In a situation where all Partic IP ants had similar basic attributes, weapons, and equipment, so long as the other party didn't foolishly take independent action, their victory against her would be guaranteed. However, before Wu Lingling could call SHI Plus Feng, the holographic screen in the middle of the arena revealed the first matchup of the compet Tion. Upon seeing the matched teams, the entire arena instantly fell silent. As if fate was toying with her, Wu Lingling had gotten matched against Jiyu Tong's team in the very first round. The matchup that everyone thought would only appear in the final round had actually appeared in the first round. Wu Lingling doesn't have any teammates. Wu Lingling is Partic IP-8ing by herself? Is she insane? Surprise and confusion flashed across Jiyu Tong's eyes when he saw the information displayed on the holographic screen. Out of the 1,000 or so freshmen this year, the only person Jiyu Tong acknowledged as his rival was Wu Lingling, Wu Xiaoxiao's younger sister. As for everyone else, he placed no importance on them at all. Once he defeated Wu Lingling, he even planned to challenge Wu Xiaoxiao before graduating, becoming a legend in the GODS Domain Academy. While everyone was still trying to process this situation, the mechanical voice of the compet Tion's administrative system echoed throughout the arena. May the Partic IP ants of both teams enter the virtual gaming cabins. The match will begin in 1 minute. The mechanical voice interrupted everyone's thoughts. When Wu Lingling saw Jiyu Tong's team walking to the gaming cabins, she gritted her teeth and swiftly made her way to the center of the arena as well. Then, she laid down into a gaming cabin and entered the virtual arena. While both teams were waiting for the timer to count down and the system to teleport them to a random battlefield, Jiyu Tong's team members couldn't help but look at Jiyu Tong and ask, "Boss Jiyu, should we step aside and let you fight Wu Lingling one-on-one?" The two of them knew that Jiyu Tong had originally planned to utilize his victory against Wu Lingling to increase his reputation in shadow. However, now that Wu Lingling was Partic IP-8ing by herself, it'd be meaningless even if the 3 of them won against her. No. Jiyu Tong shook his head. Then, in a definitive tone, he said, "We'll fight together. Since Wu Lingling has given up on the compet Tion, she is no longer worthy of being my rival." You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.